let's get started here. So this is awesome. I love the Midwest so much. I'm Leilani Cawthon, your host today, CEO and publisher at the Learning Counsel News Media and Research Organization. We run the biggest survey nationally every year and find out all kinds of really interesting stuff. And this year was no different. Unbelievable shifts in just how people were answering this year. So we're going to talk about that when we get to the middle of the day. And also show off what the Edu Jedi Leadership Society's been doing. Ivy, I think you're a member. Didn't you sign up when we were out there?
Yes.
Yeah, it's harder to get people to sign up now because we're not physically there with a piece of paper in their face, But a lot of people are signing up digitally anyway, like just getting on there. It's such an interesting time in so many ways. And I actually am really excited that schools like yours, Ivy, and people out there, they're causing learning anyway. I mean, if I really think about this happening to us 15, 20 years ago, where we could not possibly afford devices for every kid or do anything online with kids, we would have been dead in the water. We would have been printing packets, like some schools were doing that during this stuff, but it would be a total debacle, like a year off, basically. But there is learning occurring all over the country. And so all these executives from all these schools and districts all over the nation just did a mad scramble. And it is so heartwarming for the Learning Council to be doing this tour, since last April, just talking to people, what are you doing, what's happening, blah, 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 sharing, and seeing America rise. That's so, I get a little griefy about the whole thing. So anyway, so we're going to have a good day together today. We're going to have you go first. First of all, Ivy, look at your cool slide. But I am going to give you the presenter rights and then turn my camera off so we can spotlight you and it's all about Ivy. So give us the rundown, what happened. And it's emotional. Yesterday we had a lot of emotional moments, and it's sort of the theme right now all across the nation. I get it. And here's the place to really lay it on the line, what's really going on, because a lot of times the outside world doesn't understand how hard this is. For the people trying to run the show. And that's what we're here about. So let's do it. Okay. So I'm turning my camera off and you take the screen.
All right. So I'll just begin by kind of talking and laying out the kind of timeline of how things progress for me and for my district. So I met the Learning Council and Leilani and Doug almost like a year ago exactly. It was right before the school closures and everything in mid-March. And we went on spring break and we never came back. And so our district we had somewhat prepared. So we had been talking about the possibility of closing school for 2 weeks, which we thought was insane sounding. We would shut down for 2 whole weeks and kids would be learning online, and this is just madness. And so we went into that with that very hopeful mindset of, hey, this is just for 2 weeks. Let's prepare 2 weeks of lessons, 2 weeks of resources. And we were kind of on top, we meaning technology department, district leadership, were on top of preparing some resources for teachers. So we gave a template for preparing lessons. We gave platforms. So we said, secondary, your LMS is Canvas. So everything should be built out in Canvas. Elementary, we don't have a set LMS in elementary. So if you're already using Google Classroom, continue using Google Classroom because that's going to be what your students know. If you're using Seesaw, continue using Seesaw. But we didn't want to push teachers into, okay, you need to be using Google Classroom now. So if you've never used it before, surprise, you need to, get on board with it. We didn't want to add any more to people's plates. And then the last day before our spring break, we actually canceled school. So we had a teacher only day, and it was a day to work and to get things prepared because we were under the plan of, we're going to go on spring break and then we might not come back. So let's prepare for 2 weeks of online learning following spring break. So as you guys know, that came and went, and we never came back in the spring. So what that consisted of was a lot of looking back. I mean, it seems like a blur for someone in my position, supporting teachers, supporting technology, now supporting parents. We were not a one-to-one district. We had a device for every 7th through 12th grade student. And then we had one elementary building that was one-to-one with devices going home. So we had iPads there. We had some iPads in the middle school, some MacBooks in the middle school, and then MacBooks at high school. And then we had our kids in all the other elementaries that didn't have a device. So we turned into supporting anything and everything that people had at home. So we ended up, instead of being in the district where teachers and staff can put in a work order to support technology, we had to have some sort of public facing way for people to get help with that. So we came up with a Google form and we put it on our website, and anyone, students, parents, whoever, could fill out that Google form to tell technology how, what the problem was, what they needed support with. Phones were ringing off the hook, emails were coming in nonstop. Lots and lots and lots of Zoom meetings, as you all have experienced, I'm sure. We did make the decision, and we're a Google Apps for Education district, but prior to, so in this kind of prep week or two, kind of heads up time before we actually went on spring break and never came back. So in this kind of preparation period where we're planning for maybe a shutdown, we did decide that we would use Zoom for video conferencing and synchronous learning. So we got a Zoom account for the district, and we provided some training for teachers because, there have been Zoom bombings. There have been there was a, kind of a security issue with Zoom several years ago that had been resolved. And, but we decided that, we felt strongly that if we set defaults, if we make these rules and we actually train teachers and say, here are the expectations, here are the requirements for using Zoom, it was a much better tool for the job than Google Meets or Hangouts, if you will. So we didn't go with the Zoom. And I am happy to say, as of today, about a year out almost, we have yet to have any sort of Zoom bombing, Zoom attack, anything like that. We had one teacher she got scared that she was getting Zoom bombed, and it was just a kid's dad from her class. So little scared, but turned out to be just fine. So we do have rules for, you have to have your name. Students have to have their name on their Zoom. They can't call themselves something else or call themselves something funny or inappropriate. Teachers have to have a waiting room. So then that way they are only admitting people that they know. So if a student doesn't have the appropriate name on, the teacher doesn't let them into the class. Passwords are optional. So some teachers do have passwords. No link sharing, because most of the time people were getting in trouble. They were tweeting links and things like that. So none of that. And then we did turn off recording. So once we got into, okay, this is the new way of business. This isn't just, we're going to use Zoom to video conference so that people can still have meetings and that teachers can get back in touch with students. Like, okay, now we are actually going to be doing virtual learning. We're going to be introducing new material. Teachers need to be having class meetings with students. So we ended up, teachers wanted to record themselves. So then we're like, ooh, FERPA. So that's dangerous, because when you record a student, you record something like that, then that becomes an educational record and we have to follow all the guidelines with that. So we turned off the recording for Zoom, And then we actually developed a little training course that teachers have to go through to be able to have that recording feature re-enabled for them. So that's just kind of us crossing our T's, dotting our I's to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to make sure teachers are aware of all of the FERPA regulations with recording and anything like that. We went from there to really building out online resources for students. We went to building out, you know, offering as much PD as possible for our teachers and staff without overwhelming. So we didn't require them to come to PD, but we would offer what they needed. So we offered sessions on Zoom. We offered sessions on, I did multiple sessions with like, okay, how to use this Zoom feature for the whiteboard or to annotate or to give control to a student so you could do this activity with them and they could, you know, drag and drop this manipulative for you. We did, you know, we use Clever single sign-on to access apps and things like that. So lots and lots of just relevant PD that they're going to put right into practice. And it was wonderful. Some of the best PD leading experiences I've ever had in my now 12-year career in education, because it was the urgency. You know, teachers needed this. It was relevant. They were putting it into practice immediately. They needed this, and it was wonderful. We also offered, so anyone providing the PD, so in my district, we have some instructional coaches, and we were given the recording capability in Zoom. So we would record any sessions, and then we started making kind of a depository, a library of all of these trainings that we were doing. I would do trainings for parents and helping them with different things like getting their child logged into Clever and opening apps and different things like that, because that's what we were having a lot of. You know, all of a sudden parents are having to help their child navigate their iPad or help their child navigate all of these online resources. And there was a funny, you know, tons of funny memes and things came out. But one of my favorites was like a parent shared it. And it was like the teacher says, oh, just log into ZipZorp and click on Kizzlebop and just then click on the blah, 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 you know, all these things that teachers have or parents have never heard of. Parents have no clue what they are. Sometimes kids, maybe the kid doesn't even really know what it is. And so trying to navigate that and help kind of translate what that means. So that was fun. Then we have a high Hispanic population. So then any of those resources, now we're also having to create things in Spanish and helping those students where there's the language barrier with students and parents and trying to help that. While all of this is happening, we also have a report that came out from the state that said basically hotline calls for the state of Missouri had dropped by half, basically. So schools are closed. Teachers are not able to report signs or, you know, when they suspect some sort of abuse or neglect, which was very scary and very sad. So what our district did was every teacher needs to be in touch with every student. And the goal was once a week. And that turned into, okay, maybe it was a little longer than a week, but we were able to get in touch with every single student in our district to just check in with them and make sure they were okay. And then we saw, okay, a lot of this social emotional learning. So you hear a lot about SEL. And that was becoming a big piece too. So we turned to our counselors and we said, what training and things can you guys offer? So we brought in counselors to do some specific SEL PD for teachers, and that was incredibly beneficial. And just, making those connections, keeping those connections. And this is still, spring of 2020. So as things kind of settle down, we get into this new routine, we get in this new way of life, we start looking at, okay, well, this isn't going away. So what is the fall going to look like? What are we going to do there? So we convened 2 reentry task forces. So an elementary reentry team and a secondary reentry team. And I actually served on both of those, which was an interesting to see the differences between the 2 reentry plans. And it was decided that our secondary, because there are a lot of, when you're a secondary electives teacher, you might be a one-off. You might be the only teacher that teaches, um, you know, personal finance, or you might be the only teacher that teaches theater. There's only one of you, so you can't have, okay, you're going to be the virtual English teacher and I'm going to be the in-person English teacher or whatever. So what secondary decided to do was to do a combination. And our district, looking at other districts and kind of going off of what we sent out a survey to all stakeholders, and what we saw from around us was really, I take it as a win, but every district around us, the feedback they got from parents was that about 80% wanted to come back in person and only 20% wanted to be virtual. But in our district, it was about 40% really liked virtual. And then additional comments from the survey is that the spring went great. And that was kind of like reassurance to us, like, wow, we were assembling this plane during flight and we did a really good job. And so, let's keep doing what we have been doing, communicating, giving as many resources as possible, but not spreading people too thin. And we decided that our district would be, you were going to pick one or the other. You were going to be in person in August, you were going to be virtual in August. And you couldn't go back and forth, but if you chose in person and then wanted to switch to virtual, you could do that at some point in the semester, but then you had to stay that decision. And then at semester, you would have the opportunity to do the opposite. So if you had chosen virtual and then you wanted to come back, you'd have to wait until semester and then you could come back in January. So that really helped us to nail down numbers. It helped with enrollment whenever that time came over the summer, and figuring out how that would work. Now our elementary did something a little different. So they had specific grade level teachers who were virtual teachers. We are the pirates, so they became e-pirates. And so we had e-pirate students and e-pirate teachers. And then, so depending on those numbers, we had, so many teachers that would be teaching virtually, only virtually. And then we had teachers that would be in person in elementary. And because, it's not set up the same way with scheduling as secondary, it worked out that way. So this was really interesting because it really has highlighted the way that elementary kind of reimagined how it would all work. And then secondary ended up with a traditional approach, but putting it online. And the way it's turned out is that overall, elementary teachers and parents of elementary students have been a lot more satisfied with how it's gone versus secondary. So it just kind of has proven the thoughts that like the Learning Council has with, okay, this is the way we've always done teaching. but is it the best way to do it? So trying to keep that traditional model and just translate it to online learning didn't really work out. So we're looking at, what is the feedback? What is the data telling us? And how can we change that so that we do a better job next year, and so that we have teachers that are happier, teachers that are less stressed, and then parents and students that are more pleased with the education that they're getting. So, meanwhile, so that's more of like the curriculum school improvement side of my job. And then I'm also in the technology department. So then we have CARES Act grant, we have COVID relief funds from our county. And we decide that, you know what, the big challenge that we've had is not having students with the same device. So we decided to go completely one-to-one, which was in our district strategic plan, but wasn't going to be completed until 2024. So we ramped that up a little bit and bought 2,100 iPads to take the rest of our district one-to-one. So the iPads came in, awesome, great. Couldn't get hotspots for every kid. So that's kind of a bummer, because it's wonderful to have a device, but when you don't have connectivity, what are you going to do there? And we are about close to 50% free reduced lunch. So we have some low income families that don't have the part of their income to devote to a hotspot and internet connectivity at home. So cases, though, the cases for the iPads were delayed like months because of COVID. And so we ended up handing out these iPads without a case on them, and we were kind of terrified, and there were some damages and things like that, but not terrible. So we gave iPads out to all of our elementary students that were virtual. We did that first. So we did like a drive-through. So like the tech department is standing here and handing out devices for, like they're driving up and popping their trunk, and we're putting the stuff in their trunk for them, and they're driving away. And we also had to collect devices. So we have seniors, and we need to get their MacBooks back so we can reimage those and give those to the incoming 8th graders that will get MacBooks. So we're going to, so we did the same thing. They drove through. I went and handed them a Clorox wipe and a paper towel, and they were supposed to wipe down and clean their device, and then put it in a giant Ziploc bag for us, dropped it in, and then we assessed it. Like, we quarantined the devices and things, and then we assessed the any damages or anything, and applied those fees and charges, and got that all shuffled around, got the new iPads out in the fall, and then we were ready to start in the fall. We went a long time. So we started August 24th in person with students. And we went a long time. I want to say it was close to, I think it was December, before we had a case of like a positive COVID case that was like from the contact tracing, it was student to student contact during school. So all of the cases that we were coming across was, oh, well, so-and-so that I was hanging out with outside of school had COVID, or somebody at church, or somebody that I, from Labor Day, I went to wherever and got exposed. So that told us that what we were doing in our school buildings, as far as sanitizing, as far as maintaining 6 feet distance if possible, and always at least a 3-foot minimum, because that was like World Health Organization versus CDC. Students wore masks at all times except for when they were eating or drinking. And then all the sanitizing and different things like that. So that was a big win for us. We recently reconvened our reentry committees to, because our county is still saying a 14-day quarantine. And then the state of Missouri is saying that you could go back to, you could go down to just 10. And so we reconvened these committees to kind of re-examine, okay, well, is it best to keep the 14-day quarantine, or do we want to have the, shorten it and just do a 10-day quarantine? And overwhelmingly, teachers and staff said, no, we need to keep the 14-day quarantine. And, if it's not broke, don't fix it. What we're doing is, we're being successful in minimizing spread, and we're, feeling confident in how things are going. So that's just, the most recent stuff. And now we started planning for summer school. We started planning for, okay, when we come back in the fall, we might have teachers vaccinated, but students won't be. So what is that going to look like?
Well, this is really a journey. I feel like almost like you went through institutional ADD, you know? You know? It's been really a moment.
Yeah.
So I want to end off because we have like one more minute here. I'm going to ask my friend from Florida Virtual School, who think is on it, if we can unmute her, please, because she said something to me the other day that I want her to talk to you about. Basically, superintendents used to sort of feel like they had this online thing going on over here, like a separate thing, and then over the transformation period, they've said, we need to upgrade this because this was sort of crappy before. Which is really funny because, like, were you really saying that you were delivering junk before and now you got to upgrade? So, the whole issue with how you're creating things now is going to go through refinement. I think that's your next stage. So, Crystal, do you want to mention that a little bit to Ivy?
Sure. And Ivy, I'm so glad you addressed teachers and how you allowed them to kind of work at their own pace, whether it was PD or technology implementation. What Samantha said yesterday about teachers and what has been put upon them, just that, we all recognize that. And so, when superintendents would call, they were literally desperate last spring to say, help me help my teachers. I've put too much on them. And we know it's not the superintendents putting anything on their teachers, but that's how they felt. Many felt like they failed them in some way. And, a lot of times it was, they had given them all the tools, but said, build your own curriculum, or they'd given them curriculum and not the professional development. So I love hearing everything that you're doing and the process that we've all been through. But thanks for asking me to participate, Leilani.
Yeah. I just want to make that comment. So Ivy, last comments, because this is so awesome. It was so raw and real. Yeah.
So a big part of from the beginning, I'm sure you guys all these companies are coming out of the woodwork in March to offer free. Yeah. Oh, it's free for teachers because, we just love teachers so much. No. So my job is to vet all of that stuff for federal regulatory compliance and safety and security, that kind of stuff. And
yeah, because remember we said when we were out there with you, like, free is like a puppy. Don't do it.
Exactly.
There's potty training,
right? It's never a good idea. So we have a really strong curriculum approval process in place and vetting for technology, and we are a year ago. So when I talked to you last, I talked about how we're writing our data governance policy. So because of all the other little fires this year, those big projects have been slowed down. But we are finalizing that. It's going to go to district leadership for board approval. And then we will have our, start working on our action plans of specific, here is how we vet apps and here's the rubric that we use for that, those kinds of things. And then just personally, like, I'm the type of person who likes to be successful, and and I feel like Just, you have so much that you're being asked to do and so many directions you're being pulled. I can't do anything really well. And that just like at my core bothers me. So that's been a personal struggle. So I'd say to all of you guys out there that are awesome, successful, high achieving people, give yourself some grace and just, take a breath and know that you are still changing lives. You are still making a difference. Because a lot of times it feels like you're just barely hanging on.
True. That's true for everyone, even out here in the private sector.
Yeah.
Is wild. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you'll hang around for the day, put us on mute and keep your browser open, because I know you're coming back later today. That's what I'm going to ask you, the hard questions. It's going to be awesome.
It's going to be awesome.
So thank you so much.
At Renaissance, we believe that students learn better when we all work together. That's why our products work together to support continuous learning, inside and outside the classroom. Assess with unparalleled accuracy with STAR assessments. Know exactly where your students are and what they're ready to learn. Use those insights to ensure that students get exactly the right practice at the right time. Compel students to reach new goals with Accelerated Reader. Provide 24/7 access to authentic texts with Myon. Differentiate instruction for every student easily with Freckle. With Schoolzilla's data visualizations, uncover learning loss and equity issues early and address them. Celebrate with a complete picture of student performance at the student, school, and district level. We support the learner, wherever they're learning, in a whole new way.